Hi everyone! Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today is another speed card making video and I'm going to take you through this festive, critter-filled, outdoorsy themed birthday card that I actually made for my husband for his recent birthday. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting by making the sky background that is going to be sort of behind the trees. And in order to do that, I'm using alcohol inks. And I had this idea of using a bunch of different blue shades of alcohol inks and then swirling them together with plain alcohol, which is in that tub up in the top right corner, and I'm just using a paintbrush to do that. And I thought that this would give a fun kind of swirly painted looking effect. As you'll see by the end, it kind of just gave more of a flat effect than I had initially anticipated, so I'm trying to use a paintbrush here to kind of go in with paint and alcohol and back and forth and trying to kind of make it look swirly, but it kind of just flattened out in the end. So it ended up being more of a wash effect, which is fine because as you'll see in the finished card, the trees kind of cover it all up anyway. So I'm using some brown ink and stamping these trees from a Lawn Fawn Joy to the Woods stamp set onto some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, and this is a really nice sort of light brown colored cardstock. The set that these trees came from is actually a Christmas themed stamp set, but I'm finding that I can use these trees in a number of different ways. They don't just have to be used on Christmas cards. And I actually used them recently in a different video, which you can see if you click on that link up in the top right corner of your screen. And that was a Halloween themed card, where I made the trees kind of spooky by stamping them onto gray cardstock and having them look sort of dark and eerie. So these trees are super versatile, and I've been having a lot of fun using them in a lot of different sort of themed types of cards lately. So what I'm doing to these trees after I've stamped them out is actually adding some accents using a white pencil crayon to add highlights and almost like a Versamark marker. This isn't actually Versamark brand, it's I think Ranger Letter It brand, but it's the same thing. It's like embossing ink, and it just adds a tone-on-tone shadow effect. And I sort of added some alternating light and dark with the pencil and the pen to make the highlights and the shadows. Once I was done with the trees, it was time to stamp out all of the images that were going to go on the card. So I'm stamping all of the images out onto Neenah Solar White cardstock, which is just a very bright white cardstock, which is great for Copic coloring, which is what I'm going to be using in this card, as I've been using in a lot of cards lately. It's sort of my favorite coloring medium right now. And I'm using Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and this is just a really nice ink that I picked up recently. You can actually see it in one of my recent haul videos if you've watched those, where I opened it up for the first time and tested it out. And I've been finding that it's a really great ink for stamping with Copic coloring because it doesn't bleed. But also, it just stamps kind of perfectly the first time, every time. Before that, I had been using inks where I would need to stamp twice or even 3 times to get a good impression. But with this ink so far, it's been really good and just stamping great the first time. And you know, that might be because it's kind of on the newer side, so it hasn't really dried out yet. But either way, it's been a great ink so far. So I would highly recommend it for Copic coloring with these types of images. You will probably notice as we get kind of further into the card that I stamp out way more images that I end up actually using on the card. This is something that I do a lot. I'll just stamp a whole bunch of images because I'm not really sure what I'll end up using or like what I'll need, and I just want to have everything kind of ready to go for when I'm putting the card together. So I stamp out everything, I color everything, and then at the end of the day when I'm laying everything out onto the card, I usually find that I stamped out more than I need because there's just not enough room on the card to put all these images. And this one is even a slimline card, which means that it's taller and thinner compared to the standard card size. But the cool thing about a slimline card is that it does fit into the business size envelope. So it still is good for giving away or mailing away to people. So it's great for that, but it gives you a little bit more space to work with because it has the taller dimension. So especially when you're building scenes, like I'm going to be doing on this card, it's just nice sometimes to have that extra little bit of space. So you can like play around with the sky and then still have like the full grass sort of scene building area to work with. So I really like the slimline cards for that reason. So I usually stamp out a whole bunch of images and just decide what I'm going to work with later, and in this case I stamped out way more than I needed. You'll notice that I stamped out a sun and a log and even that camper van, and I'm not going to be using any of those at the end of the day because they just didn't fit onto the card. But that's okay. What I usually do is I just, whatever I stamp and color and cut out that I don't end up using on this card, I put into a little Tupperware container. So I have a Tupperware container going with all of my leftovers. It's getting more and more full as time goes on. And a while back, I actually went through that container and took all of the scraps that I hadn't used on previous cards and put them into a card all together on their own. And at the time, I was making a lot of summer cards. So I had like little palm trees and hammocks and like cute little critters with coconut drinks and all those sorts of little cute images that I had colored and not being able to fit onto cards. So I took them all and sort of just arranged them into a circle on the front of a card and just had like a tropical fiesta style card with a whole bunch of random images just kind of plastered right on the front. And it ended up being actually pretty cute, so I was happy with it. So I do like to keep the images for stuff like that. You can always use them, even if it is just throwing them onto like a kitchen sink type card at the end of the day once they've accumulated enough. And speaking of that card, you can actually go check out that card as well as a whole bunch of other cards that I don't have the time to turn into videos, but I still make them and post them on my Instagram profile. So feel free to go check that out. It's got a lot more of my cards on there. The link is just actually in the video description down below. So you can click on it and go check out my Instagram where I have way more cards than I post on YouTube. So I'm just going through and coloring all the rest of the images in here using my Copic markers like I said before. And I'm using my typical Copic coloring technique, which if you watch some of my other videos on my channel, you probably have heard this a million times already, so feel free to skip ahead if this is getting tedious. But generally what my technique is that I use a dark color Copic to go in first, and then I blend it out with a light color. And for small images like this, I don't usually use a middle color. A lot of people like to use 3 different colors of Copic, like a light, a medium, and a dark, and that really works well for big images. For small images, I just use dark, and then I use light. But then what I do is I go back in with my dark and add sort of an extra line of shadow, and I don't really blend that out much. So it kind of acts as a third dimension because it looks a little bit darker than the original dark that you had then blended out. So that's what I usually like to do with these small images. So I used a warm gray there for the hippo, some browns for the squirrels, some warm grays for the bunny, and some nice yellows for the little chicks, which are super cute. And by the way, most of these critters, actually I think all of the critters, do come from different Lawn Fawn stamp sets, which I will have outlined down in the description below of the video. By the way, on all of my YouTube videos, I do list all of the supplies that I use down in the description below. So if you're ever interested in seeing which supplies I used in my videos, just go check that. And if I've forgotten to list something that you're interested in, of course, feel free to comment and ask, and I will definitely reply. Any stamps here that are not from Lawn Fawn are actually from a Pretty Pink Posh stamp set, which was a very cute camping themed stamp set that I got ages ago because my husband loves camping. And actually, we go camping a lot together and we use a tent that is orange, just like the one that I colored for this card. So basically whenever I color tents for cards for my husband, they have to be orange because that is the color of our tent. And I had actually stamped and colored that little bowler trailer because we don't have a trailer like that, but we really want one. It's sort of like on one of the many things on our bucket list at the moment that we are working towards. So I thought it would be kind of fun to stamp it out and color it for this card because it's like, well, we can't have one in real life just yet, but we can have one on our card. But the funny thing is that at the end of the day, I didn't even end up using it on the card because we didn't have space. So I saved it for the next card, and I will definitely use it on a different card for him. So I'm just going ahead and fussy cutting all of the images now. I do have the coordinating dies for some of these stamp sets, but not all. So for the ones that I don't have, it is just a matter of fussy cutting. So I'm showing a little bit of it here in the video, but I will cut some of it out because it is a lot. There are a lot of images that need to be cut. So I actually took more time to do this than is even shown on the video. But I do like fussy cutting. I find it quite therapeutic. You know, you just kind of sit there with your images and cut them out one by one until they're all done. It's sort of like, this is going to sound weird, but like I also kind of find washing dishes therapeutic for that reason. You know, you've got this big pile of dirty dishes and you just go through one by one and wash them, and then at the end of the day you have like the pile of clean dishes and like it feels good. At least, you know, this is what I tell myself to make myself feel better about doing chores. So now it's time to assemble the card together, and as you can see on the left side, I've got all my pieces there. I went ahead and die cut some of them off camera. So I've got my background piece that I had made with alcohol ink for the sky. I've got the card base, which is made out of some Stampin' Up! Thick Whisper White paper, which is just a nice thick white paper. Then I'll have the green hills, which I cut out of actually a piece of Lawn Fawn green colored paper. I can't remember the name of the color, but it's from their paper packs. And I used their Hillside border dies to cut out a couple different shapes of the hills. And I cut out a piece of grass for the bottom, and the tree tops for the top of the card out of green glitter paper, again by Lawn Fawn. And I actually used the Puffy Cloud border dies by Lawn Fawn to cut out those tree toppers, which you'll see in a second. Sorry about that shaky camera, I must have hit it with my forehead. But yeah, so the puffy cloud borders actually work really well for treetops. They kind of look like the leaves, at least like a cartoony version, which I thought was kind of fun. So while I was chatting there, I actually went ahead and added all of the trees to the background just on some foam. So they are elevated off from the surface of the card. And I'm adding some more foam here so that the grass layers are also equally lifted. And I'm just adhering that all together with some double-sided tape and some glue. So now I'm just putting the grass together and making sort of the different layers of hill that are going to be on the card. One kind of veering to the left and one kind of veering to the right just for the symmetry, and then the grass at the bottom. So that is the background of the card put together. Then I realized that after all of that stamping and coloring, I still didn't have a sentiment. So I went back with a little banner, and I'm stamping out this banner from a Lawn Fawn set. I think it's called Banner-tastic, and it has a bunch of different banner shapes that I like to go back to and use a lot because you can mix and match them with whatever sentiment you want. So for this case, I'm using Let's Celebrate, which came actually with one of their mini sets a long time ago, where they had like a critter and a whole bunch of little holiday elements, and then this Let's Celebrate sentiment, which I thought worked really well because it's all these critters together sort of celebrating for my husband's birthday. And now it's time to just put the whole card together, and as you can see, I went ahead and sort of laid out the images that I wanted to put on the card, at least the main ones, and I'm now adhering them all down with some foam squares. At least mostly with foam squares. A lot of the critters are getting foam squares, so just to give them a little bit of extra dimension off from the top of the card. And then some of the other pieces, like the grass and the trees, I'm just using glue, so they'll just lie flat against the card. They don't need the extra dimension. So I kind of like doing that often where I have sort of a mixture of elements on my card that are popped up with foam or that are just glued down to the surface, because then you kind of get the change in dimension, some flat and some popped up, which is sort of more visually interesting, I think. I especially like just gluing things down that are meant to sort of be more in the background down. So like for example, that tent is sort of meant to be behind the critters, so I glued it down so it's flat on the surface, and then I use foam squares to pop up the critters that are meant to be in front of it. And this is now the time where you can kind of see how few of the stamped images I ended up using. I did use a lot, but there are a bunch that I also left out. So I didn't use the trailer, and I didn't use the sun, and I didn't use the log. They just didn't fit, and like, this card is already very busy. That's actually something that I struggle with in my card making, I think. I tend to overuse things and kind of make the card busier than it should be. So something that I'm trying to work on in sort of my card making style is paring down and sort of simplifying the card, because sometimes simpler is better, and something can really stand out even if it is the only element on the card. It actually allows your eye to be drawn to it rather than sort of confused by everything going on. So I'm trying to work towards that, but for now, and especially for this card, I definitely kind of just went all out, and it's very much a critter explosion. I actually showed my sister one of my cards that I had done for the holidays a while back, where there was just like a million critters on the card. Again, if you go to my Instagram page, you'll see it. It was a holiday card where I had a reveal wheel that was showing different musical notes being sung by all of the singing fishes all around in the ocean. And as you can imagine, I put a lot of fishes in, I put a lot of things in the ocean. It was a crazy card, and my sister saw it and she said, "This is the kitchen sink card," because it's just everything but the kitchen sink is on this card, and that kind of just is my style. So that's definitely where this card went as well. So I'm just finishing up sort of the last details on this card now. I decided to go ahead and add some shadows to all of these critters with a very light gray Copic marker. You didn't actually really see these at the end, they sort of blended in, so if I were to go back I might actually use a darker gray just to have those shadows a little bit more accentuated. I just thought it grounded the critters onto the grass a little bit more. And then finally I'm using some Wink of Stella glitter and some glossy accents. I'll just bring the card a little bit closer so you can see here all the dimension that went into it. And this is the final card. So I do hope that you all enjoyed watching this speed video and seeing how this card came together. It is a wild card with tons of different elements, and I had a lot of fun making it. In case you didn't know, I do post videos here on my channel at least once a week. So if not before, I will see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye!